This is really weird. Having a microphone for 5 people. I'm not sure. Good? Okay. All right. Hi, people. Thanks for turning up. We're just going to talk today a little bit about responsive design and give an insight into what we as designers think about and things that we consider when we're doing responsive design at Red Badger. So the first thing that I'm going to say, well, I'm not going to say, Joshua Brewer is going to say, is this. And basically, I've come across quite a lot of people, especially stakeholders, who think that responsive design means designing 3 layouts. So a mobile, a tablet, and a desktop. And that's obviously not true now, because we have thousands of devices, thousands of different ways that we can render the content of a website. So the first thing, we've kind of split the presentation into different chunks, and the first one that we're going to talk about is the framework. So the developers here had an Ask Me Anything session once that I went to, and it was I was quite surprised that a few developers were asking me what responsive meant and what was the difference between responsive and adaptive and stuff like that. So we've just put together a quick few slides on kind of what responsive design is and the different frameworks that exist, and you might know the terminology of. So basically, responsive design is user-centered design, and it's not just about rendering content well on devices, but adapting to them. So rendering well on mobile doesn't mean just that. It means that if somebody's lying on their side in bed, they want to be able to see the appropriate rendering for content, not just have to scroll up right and left to work, like in every single instance. And you want that journey to be consistent. So if they start off looking at something in bed and then on their iPad,
it's on your mic because this mic doesn't work. It's too far away for it.
Oh,
yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I guess I don't need that anymore. So basically, that to kind of have a unified journey from phone through tablet on the bus to desktop at work, so that you don't have maybe different content on different devices or a different menu structure on different devices and things like that. So from a kind of, I guess, responsive historical point of view, there are now 4 main layouts for web design. And that's the static liquid, which is also called fluid, and adaptive and responsive. And they're all very different. So at Red Badger, we just build responsive design, but it's good to have an understanding of the other frameworks so that everyone is kind of talking the same language. So static layouts are just the basic layout that used to be built in tables. Everybody's seen them, just websites that sit in the middle of the page. They don't do anything. You lose content off the edge when you resize your browser, or try and look at it on your phone and it goes tiny. Doesn't mean that they're badly designed, it just means that they're not responsive. And another way to kind of combat that on a phone is to have an M.dot site, which is what the Financial Times had when we first got there. And that involves maintaining 2 code bases, writing 2 types of editorial, like just, it's a lot of upkeep for something that really can be avoided. So pros and cons. It's cheaper because it's only one thing, just built one time. You don't really have to do as much discovery and preparation for it, but it does give quite a poor user experience. It doesn't take into consideration the screen size that you're using. And if you want to have a mobile site, you have to build a whole new site just for mobile. So this is, this is static in action. Don't know why it's flickering so much. So basically you can see it just cuts off the content and nothing stacks and nothing moves and you don't really get to see anything. No. No, stop. There we go. So the next one on the list is liquid. And this is also called fluid. And what happens is the containers that the content's held in shrink down as you change the size of your browser. So that it kind of does change a bit to the screen size, but it doesn't optimize it. Things don't stack and content does also get lost or uncomfortable to read. It is a more flexible layout than static. It does have a good user experience across the whole range of desktops, really, but still won't work on a phone and has inconsistent content. And this is Liquid in action. So you can see that the text is wrapping and the columns are getting smaller. So everything does stay on the page, but it just looks really, really ugly when you get down to mobile. Nobody wants that. Adaptive. So this is interesting. This is an interesting one. This one is still used a lot in the modern web. And one thing that I'm quite passionate about is not saying that adaptive is bad design and development, because I think it can work in certain circumstances. So basically, it's just adaptive is a series of static layouts that use media queries and breakpoints to kind of tell what should be rendered on what device. So you have a good user experience across all devices. You've only got one site to manage across mobile and tablet. It does take longer to build, and more unique screen resolutions, which there are thousands of now, it won't take that into consideration. So you will still have some people having a bad experience. But this is adaptive. You can see how it snaps. The text doesn't wrap, which I think is nice. And then here, the column, the blue column, is kind of stacked underneath, and now they're all stacked in a row. So it's still comfortable to read all of that content, and it is all displayed. You just have to scroll down the screen. So if you were on a mobile phone, you'd still get everything. So responsive design is a mixture between liquid and adaptive. It means that you can basically control it pixel by pixel if you need to. So if you're getting a lot of traffic from one particular device, you can kind of optimize your layout for that device, even if it's only like 10 pixels smaller than the device above it. So it supports multi-device users. Now Google's taking it into consideration. If you don't have a responsive site, you get penalized, which is a bit mean. It can be seen as stifling and restricted to creativity. I don't personally think that's true, but that's because I work with really good developers. And it does require more thought during the research and discovery phase. And this is responsive. Ah, that's not. This is. Which, I mean, we're all really used to seeing as kind of upside now. So it's fluid in that the text is wrapping, but it's also adaptive in that it's kind of snapping underneath, everything's scaling and moving. And that would basically work on any size pixel device. So this website is The Guardian, which is held in high regard in design and development circles. It was referred to a lot when I was working at the Financial Times, like, make it look like The Guardian. And another reason that this talk came about was because I was talking to one of the senior stakeholders after I'd been there for over a year. And we were trying to get the front page right. And obviously you've got live content, so headings are different lengths every day, stanfers are different lengths, things go in a different order, you have different layouts, and it's a really complex thing to get right. And again, he said to me, why don't, like, just look at The Guardian, why is it so hard? They've done it. And I just said, well, their site isn't responsive, it's adaptive. And he was like, oh, well, we don't want a responsive, we don't want an adaptive site, it's lazy development. And I was like, but you're telling me to do something that you like, and you like it because it's adaptive, because the content stays in the same place and everybody knows where they are. So it was kind of another kind of wake-up call that maybe senior stakeholders aren't told this information at the beginning of the project, or like what different kind of terms mean and why they're good and why they're bad. So The Guardian does it really well because it has quite graceful degradation in that this is the desktop view. And when you go down to the next one, everything's still in the same place, like the text and the titles and the headlines and everything still at the same line lengths. Just this headlines and weather has moved from the sidebar into the top. And then when you go down again, all that's happened is the margins have got wider so that this will stay the same for longer as you scale the browser down and down. So it still makes for quite an enjoyable responsive, well, it's not responsive, adaptive kind of viewing. So this is basically what it is. It's a mixture of liquid and adaptive, and you just use media queries and breakpoints to tell the browser what layout it should be rendering. And when we talk about breakpoints, personally, I think breakpoints are arbitrary, but there are these kind of general rules. They're good starting points. I think actually maybe slightly different than this, but a lot of people do take kind of iPhone and iPad and Mac resolutions, and I think tying it to devices is a really bad idea. So we'll talk about that a bit more now.
So let's see. Yeah. Let's discuss about breakpoints and media queries and see how these are helpful in order to build a responsive web design. So first of all, let's understand what breakpoints are. Actually, breakpoints are the viewport widths at which your content changes your layout from one size to the other. So exactly what Clem says is that you have to be careful when you choose your breakpoints, because it's better to your breakpoints to be based on your content and not on your device or on a specific product. So it's very important to start always designing mobile first, starting from small sizes and has the experience as you have more real estate available for the screen. And another thing that is very important about your content is that you should be careful about how many characters you use on each line. So there is a general rule that around 75 characters is a good amount of copy in order to be able to read through, really easy. So the way we are picking the breakpoints can be different. So you can either start, as we said, from a small screen and enhance the experience until a breakpoint is necessary. And this is a really good way in order to optimize your content and also the numbers of the breakpoints possible. So this is one way to use breakpoints. The other way is exactly the opposite, starting from major breakpoints when you have a large screen, and then this is easier for you to adjust the margins and the paddings, or also you can play with the font sizes, because it's really good to experiment a bit around that when you have more screen available. But either you go on this way or the other way, there is not right or wrong way. So this is what we said, that the breakpoints are arbitrary. So this is a discussion that we would like to have with you, because the question is, what is the best way to choose your breakpoints? What do you think? Is there a standard way to choose breakpoints or not? Somebody wants to answer? Somebody wants.
I mean, do you actually have a part in choosing the breakpoints, or do you just take the designs from the designer and like measure them, and that's the width that you start from? Yeah.
Yeah, from the designer.
Yeah.
I was going to say that as developers, we look at the mobiles and all the devices that we should support, and therefore we put them into priority in testing and things like that. So if you knew that in particular a site was going to get a lot of traffic on certain devices, would that be a certain point for breakpoints? I know that sort of, it's one of the other approaches. I know you said no devices, but
yeah. Well, if you do have the metrics, so if you're redesigning or making a static site responsive, then you will have some kind of data record of who's accessing it. Well, not who, hopefully, but how many users are accessing from which devices, and they can definitely kind of be put into the mix of why you would start from those points. I mean, it is standard to start with devices, so you just think, okay, iPhone, iPad, but I think it's just really good to get out of the habit of calling the designs like iPhone and iPad, or like phone, iPad, and because it kind of puts preconceptions into people's minds about the sizes and things like that. So,
or even if you start from breakpoints that are according to device, it's good also to check on other viewport widths, so not only be based on the standard breakpoints, but to see how the website is along other breakpoints. So it depends on each project.
That makes sense.
So the next thing that is totally related with breakpoints are media queries. So media queries are simple filters that can be applied on CSS styles. And actually, this is what makes it easy to change styles based on characteristics of the devices that render the content. So while you can query different kind of things like type, width, height, orientation, or resolution, we usually use the media queries on responsive websites for min or max width or min or max height. And but you can query more things, of course. But it's very very smart to use mid width or max width instead of min device width because this will cause a better experience in the future. And also, it's important to use relative sizes for your content, even if it's images or even if it's fonts. It's better to have relative sizes or percentages in order to define the elements and the proportion of it. So the media queries, as we said, can be applied on the device based on the viewport size, and this is the standard syntax that you can see, and can be applied on large screens, small screens, or everything between. So this is a really good website for inspiration. It's called mediaqueries.es. So if you click on it, let me do that. Sorry. So yes, when you click on it, there are different kind of examples of responsive websites, and it's very interesting to see how the media queries are used. Also, something that's really interesting is how the header and the menus change according to the media queries. So you can see that you can apply whatever style you want in order to have a better experience for your navigation or other parts. So when you have times, it's really good to have a look and experiment a little bit with different websites. I'm not going to focus on this, just have a look. It will be really interesting. Let me go back. Yes, so now we're going to talk about styles.
Okay, so this is where we start, where we should start. We haven't actually on our new website, and I don't know why, but that's caused a few problems for the kind of work we've been doing at the moment. So mobile first doesn't just mean small or mobile or different. It just basically means stop ignoring it and don't do it last. There are a lot of advantages to mobile first. This is a quote that I think about when I think about mobile first, because it's not, it's kind of, the main reason that I like to work that way is because it forces clarity and also kind of makes stakeholders focus on content, and the amount of conversations you can have with a do you really need this to be on there kind of situation. It always helps if you're starting mobile first, because then you actually do have a smaller screen, smaller space. So yeah, it makes everyone think more about the content and optimizing it. And you do that first and then think about all the other devices. And it's a lot easier for us as designers to design to the smallest width first. And then as we get more space, it's just kind of easier to make everything flow and fit in and go where it should go, rather than having a beautiful layout on a desktop screen. And then as you condense it down, it just gets harder and harder to fit everything in, because you've made everything necessary in the way that you've designed it for the desktop. Also, it's good to think about kind of innovation capabilities and what is available on a mobile that isn't available on other kinds of devices. So content is like water, and it does just take the shape of whatever container you put it in. So you have to restrain it and make it do what you want it to do. And if you've done that already for mobile, then it should be a lot easier to do that as you move up through the breakpoints. It's also good because content does need to be maintained. If you've got a blog that has goes back for 10 years worth of entries. If some of those aren't relevant, maybe it'll give you an opportunity to kind of not show those anymore. They might clutter up your search results. They're outdated, text changed, all of that kind of stuff. And it just helps focus. So every single website is about communication, and getting the typography right is one of the main foundations for it, especially when you're thinking in terms of hierarchy. So you do kind of lose some of the control over the typography when you're building a responsive website, but you can use that to your advantage if you're using relative units and tying in other aspects of the website to the typography. Oh yeah, and the last one's actually really important. Now we've got things like Instapaper and Pocket and RSS feeds and stuff. People are going to be reading your website in a completely different way that you may never have thought about, stripping out all of the images and all of the fonts and just going to a native font. So if you don't have any hierarchy in the typography and you've just used color or something like that, then that's going to be lost and the experience is not going to be quite so good. So I think that as a designer, I try and forget about pixels because A, we've got retina displays, and B, I like to think in relative units so that I can more easily see the connection between the margins I might be using and the font sizes, and how they'll stay together and stay consistent through the kind of responsive journey. So yeah, retina. Am I still on? Yeah. Retina doesn't mean that things are going to be twice as big. It just means that they'll take up twice. You'll have twice as many pixels making up the image or whatever's being displayed. And I guess that just means that you need higher resolution, more dense images when you're doing responsive design. You have to think about that and the weight of them and how you call them and whether you want to swap them out or how you want to handle it. So we talked a bit about absolute and relative units. So absolute units just always stay the same, and relative units change. So that means that if you set your font in relative units and you set your margin in relative units, then they're automatically just going to look better and nicer and stay consistent as you go through the site. So yeah, graceful responsive behavior is really important. It means that you might need to have less media queries because everything will look better for longer and you won't get kind of fonts breaking or overflowing out containers or stuff like that. I think it's important for us to know this stuff so we can plan for that when we're designing, and that we don't get to the point where everything has to be so absolutely the right size that then you end up changing the padding at this breakpoint and at this breakpoint and at this breakpoint, and everything can just stay the same and you don't have to write more code. So these are some of the responsive units, but which ones should we be using? This is how I understand rems and ems. I think this is right, that rems go back to the HTML document, but ems only go back as far as the containing element. So they relate to the font size of the containing element. So you can't, using ems, when I tried building a website, got very confusing because it was kind of, an element was responding to its container, as being relative to its container, when I was thinking it was just being relative to the HTML document. And so you get lots of different multiplications of numbers. So basically, I guess, we have a kind of question. We don't really know what the best practice is when you're using relative units. Should you be using ems? Should you be using rems? Or should you be using percentages? Can you mix them? And how does that work? So what are your thoughts on relative units?
See, now I'm concerned because I thought ems were to the document, or at least to the closest pics to find. So if you find 16 pixels on the body, I would expect every M to be measured against that. So 1.1 16 pics, 1.4 16 pics, not 1.4 of 1.1 of 16 pics. Repeat, that's not right.
Well, yeah, I mean, it might not be right, but a lot of sites on the web say that that's how it works.
Because when I've used M's in the past, the practice has been to set the base font for the entire document and then use M's throughout. And only on fonts, I haven't used it on any other.
Yeah.
I know we should use them, but we should really change it.
So if you had a containing element that had so if you had 16 pixels defined at the HTML, and then you had a containing element that was like 1.1 rems, and then within that you had another one that was like 1.4, would that 1.4 refer to the 1.1, or would it refer to the pixel value?
I always thought it should refer to the pixel value.
So that's what I understand rems to be, but I might be totally wrong.
I'm not sure. I thought I was sure, and then that came up. I was like, now I've changed my mind. I feel a temptation to Google it.
I guess
What's the question? What's the question of rems on this?
So we had this slide. So rems always refer to the base font size, but M's refer to they're nested. So yeah. Okay. So
Yes, it is relative to that.
yeah, it is relative to the one above.
It's got a lot of maths just to.
But is it only relative if a pixel unit has been specified, or is it relative if an M has been specified?
Well, I mean, the M on email of the parts, the M will always be sort of translated in several pixels by the browser. So RAM will always be sort of based on, I think RAM always goes all the way to like the topmost element which has specified the font size.
Yeah.
So, or if there's none of them, then it will take the browser defaults, which will probably be around 16 pixels. So RAMs, they're more safe and readable.
But M's go back to the parent.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
So why would we use M's over M's? Because it seems M's.
Yeah, I have no idea.
So the idea originally behind M's. So the idea behind M's and M's, I think we were dated before M's, we then came up with M's because let's fix M's. But the idea behind M's was that there is a certain, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is a certain idea behind when you create a typography, then design typography. There is a certain proportion element, like when you design size R, size B, size in growing.
Fibonacci, I think.
Allowed to grow on a certain proportion for each, and M's are pretty good for that because you just define like the next proportion compared to the previous one. As you keep going, basically. So that's.
No, I understand. That makes sense for REMs, but I guess when you're building something, it makes sense for M's. I mean, but that makes sense. If you're building something using REMs, it's a lot simpler because you always know what the base value is.
Yeah, REMs are basically
without having to do any calculations. Yeah.
To your point about whether you mix any of those together, I guess really you want to keep it just one thing.
But how about images? So specifying the width of the images, you might always want them to be 100% of the containing element.
Yeah.
So I think using
percent, you can. I think those two units specifically meant for fonts.
Yeah. But I have used REMs as margins and padding so that they stay consistent with the font that's inside them. So
is used
from a design perspective.
For spacing rules. For spacing rules, it's also important to use the same relative unit in order to have one common language to talk to the devs and communicate, and having proportionally correct sizes.
Yeah. It's interesting. Everyone has their own ways of using them.
Yes, when we are talking about content, it's not only fonts and text, it's also images. And as we already discussed, relative units, relative sizes is good also for images in order to be measured, but it depends on the situation. For example, when you use art direction on an image, And when we're talking about art direction, it means that you use different cropped area of the image rather than different resolution of the image. Then it might be good to keep breakpoints of devices. But also, we are not fan of that. It's better using relative sizes. But let's start with the basics about images. So first of all, when you want to use images for your website, it's very important to optimize them for the web in order your loading time to be really quick. And when you want also to use images, you have to think about if the stylized text or font icon or icon font can do the same job. So it's better to use icon font or text instead of image. Another important thing in terms of accessibility is the alternative text. So it's very important to have a really good alternative text describing your image, because let's say there are people that are using e-readers, they will never see your photos, but it's good for them to have a description and let them know what this photo shows. And again, relative units, relative sizes is really important because the CSS allow our photos and our content to overflow its container. So sometimes it might be necessary to use a max width of 100% or 50-100% of the containing element in order to avoiding overflow your content and to have a nice visual result. And this is also a really nice website for inspiration. Here you can see how different images are used on different breakpoints. So I just have some screenshots here. They use different images on different breakpoints on 960, 720, 448, and 240. Let me open the website in order to see it live. Actually, here are logos and colors of really well-known brands. You can see this is the biggest breakpoint. And let's see what's happened when you're sizing your browser. So actually, this is called responsive logos. And as your breakpoint is getting smaller, you can see that different logos are used for each breakpoint. And this is really important, actually, when we're talking about branding, because we should be careful how you use branding on different platforms or devices, and especially on digital platforms, because we want the user to know where he is exactly and what is this product and this brand he's on. So here you can see how the images are changed according to the layout. This is a really good example for responsive images, actually. And yes, and let's have a look also on the formats. Because when we are talking about images, there are also different kinds of image formats. So we have raster images that are images that came from our camera or from our scanner or be created with HTML canvas element. But actually, what raster is a grid of individual set of colors. So this is like rows and columns and are full with pixels. Formats like that can be known as PNG, JPEG, TIFF, or GIFs. And another image format that's really important for us is the vector format. So the difference is that on vector, it is described the geometry of the image. It has also data in XML format and defines the various parts of the image and their relationship. So we know exactly the set of curves, the lines, the shapes, and the colors are used. And also we can create this kind of images with Adobe Illustrator, Sketch, or even with handwritten code. And one of the names of this format is SVG, that we're going to talk about right now. So actually, SVGs are very important on the responsive web because SVGs make it possible to use vector graphics in the web. So here we have a really nice example in order to understand the difference between the two formats. So first of all, we have the original icon of Twitter, and next to it we have the SVG and the PNG on a bigger size. So I think that we can clearly see that the SVG is really sharp on the edges compared to the PNG or JPEG that is a bit blurry. So actually, this is the advantage of the vector file, because we can also use it at any size without degrading the quality of it. And normally, we prefer using SVGs rather than PNGs for icon on the web from now on. And another really interesting topic is the grid. So what is a grid system for you? Because we can find grids on our everyday life. It's not only the grid that we design for websites. So do you have a term on your mind how you can describe a grid system? Do you want to give a definition or?
Flexible.
Flexible.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure. Are you just words to describe how it works?
What do you think is a grid system? Oh. How can we define the term?
Logical division of space.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Anybody else has another opinion or something? Actually, I think yes, more or less. What a grid system is actually a structure of series of horizontal and vertical lines which intersect and create columns and rows that can be used in order to arrange the content. So exactly as you described, with other words, the grid system is our page that we can use in order to arrange our content. And actually, it's very important when we are thinking about grids, not think about one grid per page, not think about a grid for a single page. Because normally we design a platform, so it's important to think as a grid system across all the pages. And it will be very helpful when you have more pages in the future or a specific platform. So let's discuss about grids generally. So one of the grids that we all know are city grids. Here you can see the grid of Barcelona that is very well laid out according to a precise plan. So we can say that Barcelona's designers are succeed in order to have a really well-designed grid. But when we have a look on another city, let's see London, it's in contrast far from a rigid grid. It's totally different. So London is spiral, full of circles, and it's not seems like a precise grid. But let's think about the difference on these two grids. So each of these grids designed for another purpose actually, because London is designed spiral in order to accommodate more buildings and more people, rather than Barcelona wants us to keep in shape what they have already as buildings in a good structure. So this is the reason why London is spiral, in order to be able to expand across the years. It's a very interesting example actually, because if we extend this urban planning metaphor on our web design, we can see very interesting parallels. So for example, if you use a grid, it's really easy to design a predictable website, visually appealing and easily navigated. And also by using grids, it's helping us to plan where the things go. And it's very important for visual hierarchy also. And actually, a grid on a website is an organizational framework that makes you to choose which is the best order in order to show your information. and also allows us for more white space to be breathable between text and images. So,
okay. So the way that designers use grids in web design is we think about two grids. So we think about the structure behind everything, and then also how the content is going to fit into that structure. So normally the responsive grid is 12 columns. I've used 16 columns, and I've used 12 columns with a nested 12 in the right-hand 8, and like really weird stuff like that. But generally, it's just a standard 12-column grid. If you use more columns, then you do get more precise control, but it's generally, I don't know, I've never used one successfully, really successfully. So I think of grid columns, which is the base structure, and content columns, which is where the text and images are going to go on top of it. And actually, I don't think they're that restrictive, and I think that because content columns can span grid columns, it enables you to have lots and lots of different layouts that all maintain the same kind of ratio of margin and things like that. So even though you have things in different places on different pages, there's still an underlying structure that people will subconsciously understand. So this is just an example of how content can just span rows, but they do always take up the 12 rows of the underlying grid. And this is an example of how responsive design kind of works better than fluid. So you have the small column, which at this breakpoint looks particularly small and difficult to read, and nobody really enjoys looking at that. But then on grid number 2 underneath, if you make that column span more of the grid columns, then and then stack one underneath, everything just looks a lot better.
And also we're going to discuss about responsive navigation. And when we're talking about responsive navigation, we mean how the menu items and the menu generally is changed across different platforms.
Can I just ask you one thing about the grid?
Yeah.
So I think I totally agree about how it gives you consistency and structure across everything. But I think it's also important to break it, isn't it? So you have things that you have a lot of structure, and then occasionally you put something in there that surprises. Because just talking the other day about how a lot of the web is falling into kind of
the same pattern.
Structure, and we need to kind of make sure that we keep pushing out of that.
I think it's interesting that you say break it, because I think like whatever you do within the grid, it will still conform to the grid.
I think it's more
about
visual break. So that you trick the viewer to kind of re-engage, and they're not just kind of
it's the content, the content columns.
Yes, because for example, let's say that you use for the main body copy, let's say 3 different columns, but you can do interesting things with your title by using the whole width of the grids. So yes, it's not exactly that you break it, it's more like combining different kind of numbers of columns for each case. And yes, we have seen really nice examples by having interesting titles or images or icon, but the main content is stick on the grid, let's say.
And you can offset, push and pull, and change the order at different breakpoints and stuff. So you can. That's why I don't think it's restrictive, and I don't think it dampens creativity.
I think it's just
you can manipulate it to do whatever you want.
It's how you are going to use actually the grid, and because the easiest way is just follow the grid and everything, but of course you can play around and do more interesting things by having more variations of the columns. Cool. So I'm going to talk about responsive now. So let me explain the question actually. When we have the menu items and we have the navigation on a big screen, and we're going to change breakpoints for smaller screens, many times we want exactly to keep the same menu items, but there is not enough space. So many times I'm wondering, should I keep the same menu items, just hide it inside a menu, or just have it open as it's on the web version?
Famous burger.
Famous burger. So what do you think on this? What is most important? Is it most important to keep the same exactly elements?
I think because it's quite a common standard across the internet. It's quite a burger. Everyone knows what it means, what it symbolizes. So now I would say that it's okay.
Okay.
So we had, when we were designing the new Badger site, on the first designs for the homepage, there was a burger at desktop, and now it's not. So, yeah, I don't know. I wasn't there, and I wasn't part of all those discussions, so I don't know what happened. But I know, obviously, somebody thought that it was not a good idea to hide the navigation on desktop.
Yeah, I think that's the right decision. And I think also it doesn't go to a burger on the mobile now. It goes to the web menu, which I think is better.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe an use better than burger.
Yeah, but it takes the same space.
Okay. It's very interesting because we're going to discuss actually for the burger menu now. Not now, in a bit. So let's recap what we already discussed. So navigation is very important, but it's a bit tricky to tackle sometimes because we want to keep the same look and feel and experience for the site. And we want also to offer to the users really good navigation and how they can find out what they are looking for inside. Also, normally the menu is on the header, and the header plays two main roles. One role is to let the user know where they are, actually, and the other is to let them navigate it through the website. So, successful responsive navigation is when let the users find out what they are looking for, but also you have to remember that the users want to feel that they're still on the same website. So now actually we're going to talk about different menu design trends, and the first of it is also the hamburger menu that you already mentioned. So let's have a look and see the history about it. So as we all know, the burger menu is the three lines that seems like a list, but actually has been much debate about whether to use the hamburger icon or not. But more and more people have been wondering where it came from. And actually, I didn't even know that, but Norm Cox was the first designer that used the burger icon for Zero Start, and this is how it looked like on the first user interface that they used.
Is that Comic Sans?
Yeah, maybe. So it's very interesting because it started being a really common pattern, but this is just an icon, and we have seen that there are also other icons that the names of it are also around meat, and this is really fun fact because we have the hamburger icon, the kebab menu, the doner menu, the meatball menu, the bento menu, and the double burger menu. And this is when you have a lot of things to put inside your menu, actually. It's really fun. I don't know. Let's see.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's called the mystery of mobile navigation. It's really fun if you think about it.
Thank you, that makes sense.
Because the name is around meat for some reason. So let's see how we can actually use and what interactions we can have with these icons. So let's talk first about off-canvas menu. So off-canvas menu are really popular actually on apps, but are also used for mobile sites. And you can, when you click on them, it's the menu is revealed. And it's very useful if you have to add many navigation items inside, because you can hide them somehow. But also it's very interesting because you have a part of the page visible, so you know exactly where are you inside the website. And another trend is the toggle menu. The toggle menu is a bit different. When you click or tap on the menu item, it's like an accordion that expands, but actually it pushes the screen down. But you can click on it and then the accordion is closed, or wherever you click on the page is closed again. And another also interesting example that it's a bit similar is the overlay style menu. So the difference on this menu is when you tap on it, it expands, but fully or partially cover the screen. So it's not the best approach if you have a lot of things to handle inside a menu, because you will cover all your screen. So it's a good idea if your menu is really small and you can easily tap inside or outside and you can close it. So this is just an overview of the trends that there are outside. I'm sure there are a lot of more in the next few years or days that you can choose from. And that's it. See if you have any questions.
Would you say like when the menu takes up the whole page and you can't see any?
Yeah.
Would you say that's bad practice?
My personal opinion is that it's bad. It's not good practice if you have so many items to include. If it's short menu, it might be not a problem, but also it depends on the website, on the structure, what is exactly above, below of the header. It might be just an image, or it might be something that is more useful than an image. So I think it totally depends.
I don't personally like covering the entire screen with the menu on mobile or desktop, because I think it's a bit disorientating. At least if you can still see the page where you were when you clicked the menu, then you kind of get an idea of.
Yeah. So yes, let's say the toggle is a better approach of the same kind of thing, because it doesn't cover, just push the content down. So yes, if you have to choose between these two, I personally prefer the toggle menu, because it's not covered.
Where the overlay, like you open it up, if you turn to a screen portrait, then you have, it doesn't matter if you've got 2 items, 3 items in there, the entire screen is covered. Also, as a developer, there's a really annoying bug where you can scroll underneath your menu, page underneath, and not the menu itself. So yeah, I'm not a fan of overlays.
Yeah, overlay is not the best choice, but depends on the website. Any other questions?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.